right, we're doing the iPad trick again, so it looks like everything works fine this way. So I'm gonna have to set my studio up better than this. This is my old room that I was in when my desk was in here before. So anyway, welcome to another exciting episode of Under the Dome. I'm your host, Alan Ulrich, here with Bob Rose. How you doing tonight, Bob?
Poverty stricken, but enjoying the early days of summer. Other than that, I hope you guys are doing all right down there.
And Will just graduated, what, kindergarten, first grade?
First grade, first grade. We now have our officially have a second grader on our hands.
Okay. So you're not hitting the fun, expensive stuff yet. You're not going to the high school. You're not going to college yet.
Not with this round of kid, but I've already been through it with two rounds. Including the oldest daughter graduating from grad school in August. So yeah, I've been down that road twice too many times.
Yeah, been there, done that. Have the canceled checks.
Right.
So Bob, not much is going on right now with the Saints, which is always good news. I mean, last week we had Passanio tearing his Achilles, and you had the Saints don't pay their bills. The funny thing that was on the news, I saw this afternoon, actually. The city of New Orleans has magically found the money to restore all the lights that are on the interstate that have been out since Ida. So that's 2 years, going on 3. They have now found the money to improve the drainage. They have found money now to light the bridge, the Crescent City Connection. I still call it the Greater New Orleans Bridge, but that whole mess. So, I mean, it's hilarious, all these projects that people have been screaming about because the Super Bowl's in town this January or February. The Saints, well, not the Saints, New Orleans is going to roll out the red carpet, push all the homeless to the side. You will not see them on the Claiborne overpass. You will not see them and they will have a nice looking city for the Super Bowl. Take that for what it's worth.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, I think the best comment I saw was, this is like when you have company coming over, and as my daughter used to call it, the fake house. You got to clean everything up and get the fake house ready. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's rather entertaining. Well, happy early birthday, Jerry. We'll say happy birthday again next week too.
Yes, happy early birthday, Jerry.
Oh, I don't know if you want to use that voice right now. Do you hear a sound in the background? I think you had one earlier. I don't know if it's feedback or not. I've got my laptop and my iPad going, but I have the laptop muted and the camera off, so you shouldn't be hearing anything. But I did hear something earlier. So
I hear on your end, Alan, I hear a tiny bit of an echo, but not nearly what it was, not nearly as bad as what it was last week.
Okay, good. Yeah. Last week it was terrible. Okay. So basically then what I was going to talk about tonight was the big contracts they handed out to wide receivers. Justin Jefferson got $140 million 4-year deal, $100 million guaranteed. I think Jeudy got a 3-year, 52.7. I hear that. Yeah, $52.7 million 3-year deal. Both of them.
Jalen Waddle got a big one too from Miami.
Yes, Jalen Waddle got another big one. So the question is tonight, given the Michael Thomas contract that we're just trying to get out of, and June 1st they're officially off the books. Well, the dead money's still there, but Winston and Thomas officially off the books. Do you think the Saints are going to pay a wide receiver like a Chris Olave, because he's probably the the biggest one on the team right now, pay the receiver that kind of money, or will they move on maybe in 2 to 3 years and get, just draft another guy?
And I'll tell you, there's two drastic schools of thought, drastically different schools of thought on this. And you see NFL teams on each side of the equator, regarding this all year, all throughout the league. Buffalo Bills, one example of, we're just going to let all of our receivers walk. We feel we have the quarterback to make anybody better, and we'll rebuild through the draft. Philadelphia Eagles paid A.J. Brown last year, paid, what's his name? The other Alabama guy, Devontae Smith, this year or last year too. We saw the Kansas City Chiefs willing to let Tyreek Hill go away, and try to rebuild through the draft because they had their quarterback. That Miami, by contrast, they signed Jalen Waddle. They signed, traded for and then re-signed Tyreek Hill. The Cleveland Browns building up their receiving core. So it's going to be very interesting which side of the fence that the Saints decide to fall on. Is Chris Olave, talented? Absolutely. In fact, he's already, among a very short list of names within Saints franchise history for accomplishments. Only Michael Thomas and Marcus Colston have had consecutive 1,000-yard seasons before Olave. Have had consecutive 1,000-yard seasons before Chris. And I think that we both talked about this before. I think that we've only seen the start of what Chris Olave can really do for a football team. Is Chris Olave worth? I hate using the term worth, because we're sitting here with whatever salaries we do or don't make, and we're comparing our salaries to multi-million dollars. I mean, it's literally, it's not even apples and oranges. It's apples and the wild berries on the bush outside. So I can't see Chris Olave getting Justin Jefferson type of money, but you look at the way Jalen Waddle's contract broke down, and those two receivers have very comparable numbers, have very comparable physical abilities. If the Saints decide to pay Olave, chances are it would be somewhere in the neighborhood, probably a little bit above, what Jalen Waddle just signed for. Now, with Chris Olave being a first-round draft choice, and you and I talk about the importance of this all the time, the Saints do have that fifth-year option sitting in their back pocket. And Chris is only coming into his third year. So they don't have to make a decision on that right now. They don't have to take his negotiating team to the table right now. Although they're, with a top tier player, if Chris Olave elevates into top tier level, you always run the risk of, I'm going to hold out of camp until I get a new contract. We've not reached that level with Chris Olave's talent yet. But like I said, it's going to be very interesting. If Olave has another year statistically, like he did his first two, it's going to be very interesting to see the way the Saints react, because the ball's in their court. And again, it will be very telling. And you kind of spoke to it when we were talking off the air before we came on. It can be very telling to see what school of thought that they have. Do you rebuild your receiving core through the draft? In other words, once you develop receivers and they get to that top tier money, do you let them walk out the door and throw your money at other positions? Cornerback Paulson Adebo's coming up. Play Brian Bresee in a handful of years. You're going to have to make a decision on him. How are you going to pay a quarterback, and who's it going to be moving forward? Those kind of decisions. Or do you try to keep your receiving talent in-house? I could see the Saints going either direction on this. Michael Thomas was the first wideout that they really paid in the big money free agency era. They never lost Marcus Colston, but Marcus was one of those rare human beings that just, I'm happy in New Orleans and I'm happy to take what you give me. Michael Thomas was a completely different animal, much more of the modern athlete. Pay me, hand out all the time, wanting to be patted on the back and everything like that. And in the 2 years we've got and we've had seen from Chris Olave here, he seems more towards that type of personality than he does the Marcus Colston. So make no mistake, if the Saints are going to keep Chris Olave, they are going to have to eventually decide to pay him.
Yeah, and that's that. One of the things that we talked about off air, and then I pointed out with the Justin Jefferson deal. Keep in mind the Vikings have a rookie quarterback. And they just drafted him. So this is a 4-year deal. You've got 2 to 3 years to make a decision on J.J. McCarthy, whether or not he's your guy. So you can afford to have a quarterback type of, because I think he's got $110 or $100 million guaranteed. You can burn your quarterback money on a receiver like him. So when you have to pay your quarterback, the Justin Jefferson deal is reaching its tail end. So, you've managed your cap well. The Chiefs, on the other hand, and the Bills, both are teams that think they are at that point and have the talented receiving. They'll pay Travis Kelce, but the Chiefs think they can do anything. Their quarterback can elevate any receivers they throw out there. The Bills are feeling that way, that Josh Allen can elevate his receiving core, so you can just draft guys. The Saints, on the other hand, it looks like the Saints really are in that no man's land. You've got a quarterback, you're paying him, and he's paid, 12th or 13th highest quarterback pay in the league, which is about his talent level, his execution level, but it's still money, and you're trying to clean up your cap. I'm glad you mentioned Paulson Adebo, because we're going to see that decision, and I think we're getting a hint on that decision with the decision to draft Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yes.
Your decision may be, I may trade Lattimore to pay Adebo because I've just drafted Lattimore's replacement here with Kool-Aid. Or counter this, I may let Adebo walk because I've just drafted his replacement, especially if Lattimore seems to have come back to his Pro Bowl form, bought in the whole bit. It's 50. It's about, I'd say about 60% they're going to pay Adebo and trade Lattimore at this point. We'll see how the season goes to determine whether or not we're going to see this is what they're going to do. But right now, 60% pay Adebo, 40% they're going to get rid of Lattimore, if not during a year, for sure by next season.
Yeah, I'm kind of in that thought too, and I've said this to people that and we said it to each other during the draft. You, me, and Brendan, that they didn't. The drafting McKinstry did not mean that they were going to trade Lattimore by June 1st.
No,
that frankly that was never going to happen, and June 1st came and went, and guess what, folks? Didn't happen. But after the year, much different story. Lattimore is under contract until 2027. Because of 2 additional voided years beyond that. But he has a cap number that's going to escalate to over $31 million next year. That's why I feel that, nobody is saying that Paulson Adebo is better than Marshawn Lattimore, but the way Adebo played last year, he elevated himself into not the top tier cornerbacks, but definitely the next level down. You're still not going to have to pay Paulson Adebo anywhere close to $31 million. So that's why I feel I agree with you. You have McKinstry on a rookie contract. You have Alontae Taylor, who himself you're going to have to make a free agency decision on in 2026. I get this gut feeling like you do. They're going to play things out with Lattimore because this is a better team with him than without him right now. So play out the string in 2024. Make a run with him. and then try to deal him and get some of that money off of your books this offseason to turn around and pay Paulson Adebo.
Absolutely. And that's why I thought of the whole Chris Olave situation, because you're going to have to make that decision with your receivers soon, because you've got Olave, you've got Shaheed, you have A.T. Perry. Now, they're all staggered. You're going to have to make a decision on Shaheed before you have to make a decision on Olave.
Yeah.
But Shaheed is probably going to be a restricted free agent, exclusive rights free agent first, then a restricted free agent. So technically, you're really not going to have to worry about him hitting the free agency market for another 2 years. I don't know the specifics on his contract, but you're still going to have to make that decision. What are you going to do on this? And the Saints have had success because Shaheed is an undrafted guy with Deontay Hardy. With these guys, they've managed to bring in A.T. Perry was a late round pick. They have had success bringing in receivers. Not great success, but they've had success, because we can look at Tre'Quan Smith, Nick Toon, just those guys. But overall, even a guy like Brandon Coleman, who was an undrafted guy, you still got some years out of him.
Yeah.
So they probably feel pretty confident in their ability to find a replacement for Olave, unless Olave elevates himself to those top tier receivers. Michael Thomas clearly did, and that's why, more so than Brandon Cooks bitching after that Rams game, that's why they decided to trade Cooks, because they knew we were going to pay Thomas. Thomas is going to be our number one guy, and we can find another Brandon Cooks, which they kind of have. And Brandon Cooks is not a bad receiver. He's had, four 1,000-yard receiving seasons. He's on his fourth team, but he's been very productive for every team he's gone to. But the Saints have been able to find guys to fill his role and be very successful with it. So, it's a decision they're going to have to make based on how confident they feel about acquiring new talent.
Yeah, and they drafted that kid Bub Means, from Pitt in the 5th round this year. What if Bub Means comes out and shocks the world? What if A.T. Perry elevates his game to a near spectacular level? Now all of a sudden, like you said, I'm not going to call Chris Olave expendable, but you can then look at your depth chart and say, we hit some real finds in the third on the third day again with Bub Means potentially, A.T. Perry potentially. We don't see a reason to pay Chris Olave a contract that's going to be a $25 million a year cap hit. When we still have these other guys on more reasonable deals, or in this case, rookie contracts. Now the difference in between then and the Michael Thomas, Brandon Cook situation you talk about, and Alan, you know this. You look at who the quarterback was at the time.
Yeah.
A Drew Brees can make a Brandon Coleman serviceable, a Tre'Quan Smith serviceable. Derek Carr is not that kind of quarterback.
Yeah.
But again, and the Chris Olave situation might also be answered by the play of Derek Carr. Mm-hmm. If Derek Carr plays pretty damn well, then you have yourself a quarterback that you think you can win with under contract. You can then turn around and pay Chris Olave. You can then turn around and maybe let Chris Olave walk out the building, with the receivers that you have on the roster, and keep a Paulson Adebo, keep a Brian Bresee, re-sign a Willie Gay, that kind of thing. Right. If Derek Carr plays poorly, then you almost have to dive into the quarterback pool in the first round next year, meaning that you have one less high draft pick to retool that receiving core with. Therefore, you almost have to pay Chris Olave to be the supporting cast for your upcoming rookie quarterback, a la what the Vikings just did with Justin Jefferson and J.J. McCarthy.
Yeah. And, the other thing is important to keep in mind too is teams like the Bills and the Chiefs and those, and even Dallas with CeeDee Lamb. Those are teams that are thinking they are just a couple of players or a couple of breaks away from being in the Super Bowl again. Whereas the Saints, they feel like they can be competitive. They feel like they can probably win the division still. But they don't see themselves as Super Bowl contenders, just a team that is a winning organization that can qualify for the playoffs and possibly win the division to host a playoff game, because they're in the process of trying to retool and restock this roster. And they feel like they can do that while still winning. They feel like we got a quarterback who can win enough for us that we don't have to make a decision on a rookie quarterback right now. We can start building our roster elsewhere, offensive line, defensive line, secondary, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a no man's land, especially with, Loomis talking about trying to get out of this cap situation this season and next season. So they're not going to be looking to really hand down a lot of big money right now. So that'll be interesting. There was one thing that you had mentioned earlier when we were talking about all the cornerbacks. It's amazing to think to me, as somebody who watched the Saints for so many years, that the secondary is one of the richest parts of this roster. I mean, you look at the cornerbacks in this franchise's history prior to Marshawn Lattimore. So we're talking 2017, 2016 on back. Okay, we can say Tracy Porter. We can say Jabari Greer. Then we start going into Ken Crawley. I just drew a blank on his name. Fred Thomas. Fred Thomas. For people who are old like me, Toy Cook, Milton Mack, Reggie Jones, even further back, Johnny Poe, Dave Waymer. You're going back a ways, and these are all guys that we were routinely putting a piece of bunny bread in the toaster and putting it on the dark setting because that's their team photo, toast. And you just it's amazing to think that we have 4 cornerbacks who are not only can be starters, but quality starters who can really, in a pass-oriented league, who can really do something and not just take up space or, the whole time. Every time a quarterback drops back to back, go, oh God, oh God, oh God.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I used to just go, oh my God, there's too much time on the clock. We're just going to get toasted out here. They were just going to light up the secondary, I can remember Joe Montana in 1990, opening night, Monday Night Football. The Dome Patrol was beating the hell out of this guy. They only have scored 1 touchdown and I think a field goal, or maybe they'd kicked 3 field goals, something like that. And then all of a sudden, in the last 2 minutes, there goes Montana to Rice, Montana to Taylor. I'm going, oh my God, here it goes again, So now you feel like, I'll take my chances with that. We'll see what happens on this, That's why I never feared Brady. Because I'm like, Lattimore's got Evans locked up. we're gonna fix this. They're not gonna march down this field. So,
Mm-hmm.
and then even the guys who let go, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, those guys, Isaac Giddem. Who would have thought that Isaac Giddem? You lose a Lattimore, you put Isaac Giddem back there. He actually not only played well, he wasn't the weak link in the secondary. I mean, it's just it's mind-boggling. It really is, and we all rip into Dennis Allen as a head coach. It sounds like a creature's in this room. That I just keep hearing a wind sound, like something sucking air right there, and I don't know what it is, but anyway, you have these players, and Dennis Allen, for all his criticism of being a bad head coach, my God, that man can find some secondary players. And he can put a secondary together, and he can scheme up the hell of out of a defense and turn lemons into lemonade, So it's an amazing. It's one of the reasons why I don't overly defend. I guess I do overly defend him, but yeah, thanks. Yeah, that's something in the closet behind me. Oh, something under the bed is drooling, Calvin. Yeah, for all Dennis Allen's faults, I've got to give it to him. He knows how to put together defense, especially the secondary. And he was a secondary coach the year we won the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, 100%. And for all those the millions and millions of viewers that want Dennis Allen fired, you have to consider this, and this is probably why Mickey Loomis and Mrs. Benson aren't in any hurry to do it. If you fire Dennis Allen, you lose a borderline great defensive coordinator. And I'll call him a borderline great defensive coordinator. I will call him a great defensive back coach because the numbers bear themselves out. Not only the cornerbacks that you just mentioned, the cornerback unit that they currently have which for my money is the best in the NFL right now if you go 4 deep. But before that, this man, I love Delvin Breaux, and I think Delvin Breaux would have been a quality NFL cornerback had not for the injuries. But other than Delvin Breaux, you're talking about Devontae Harris, Ken Crawley, P.J. Williams when they drafted him. And I said the day they drafted him, I said they better move that boy to safety because if they try to play him to cornerback, it's going to get ugly. Well, it was ugly until they moved him to safety. But nonetheless, even with those guys, there were moments, fleeting as they were sometimes, there were moments where that secondary still made plays in the fourth quarter to pull out a shootout. I mean, that you want to talk about making lemonade out of rotten lemons. Dennis Allen was nearly a master at that, and you ran down some of the names. John Butler. I know you're in the chat. We're trying to folks. We're trying to get together, John, Allen, and myself. Trying to get together, to talk about a Mount Rushmore of Saints linebackers. Well, that one's fairly easy to do, but we were joking between the three of us that cornerback would be one of the positions that would be a real challenge. I think Marshawn Lattimore is probably the best cornerback in Saints history. But outside of that, a lot of people will point to Keenan Lewis. And, Keenan was terrific for 1.5 years, but that's it. Mike McKenzie, very good for about the same period of time before injuries caught up with him. Jabari Greer, I've always said before Lattimore, I've always said Jabari was the best cornerback in Saints history. And you named off some other ones. Toy Cook had his moments. Matter of fact, he fought Jerry Rice tooth and nail. Jerry Rice is just Jerry Rice. Mm-hmm. Dave Waymer, another great one. Tracy Porter, obviously, but people like to romanticize Tracy Porter because of the 2 biggest plays he made. The fact is that Tracy Porter was a playmaker, but he gave up almost as many big plays as what he made. The fact is that, we as Saints fans, even us elderly Saints fans, we saw too many years where, the Dome Patrol years, elite linebacking core, very, very, very good defensive line. You and I are two of the few that point that out.
Mm-hmm.
But secondary, if that quarterback could stay upright for 2.5 seconds, they were going to make big plays down the field. Just ask Jim Everett on a Sunday night football game.
Yeah.
And later on, you're talking Hazlitt's crew, elite or at least borderline elite defensive line. A couple of very, very good safeties and an aging but still effective Darren Perry and Sammy Knight. But if that quarterback could get the ball outside the numbers, they were going to, the cornerbacks were going to get toasted every time. And throughout Saints history, we saw those scenarios that we just pointed out play out themselves in the biggest games of the year in the postseason. Well, now in a pass-happy league, no less, like you pointed out, the Saints have 4 cornerbacks. Well, we don't know about McKinstry yet, until he puts on the pads for real. But there's a reason why he was, considered a first-round project. But I don't think anybody could put up a viable argument and say that, Marshawn Lattimore, Alontae Taylor, and Paulson Adebo could start for any single team in the NFL and be the number 1 cornerback on a lot of those teams.
Absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned Jim Everett on a Sunday night. I've played that game several times behind me. I've watched it several times just because I'm just so, it's surreal the way that that game just kind of unraveled the way it did, because it was 5 minutes left. The Saints are still winning 17-3, and the Rams come back, tie it, had a chance to win it in regulation, but won it in overtime. But, it wasn't like Jim Everett was standing back there and just picking his targets all night. That kind of all unraveled in the fourth quarter, because he had, under 200 yards passing in the middle of the third quarter.
Yeah.
And the Saints, they were just getting after him. Swilling, Frank Warren, they're just beating the hell out of Everett. But he was getting those passes off to Flipper Anderson, and you could see it coming. It was like a wave that was building up. And as it kept coming, these guys started catching more passes, and it didn't matter who was covering him. Torrey Cook got burned. Dave Waymer got burned. Gene Atkins was trying to cover him at some point. Robert Massey, who was a rookie, was actually doing some of the best coverage on him, but even he was getting burned. So it's one of those things that it's like I don't worry about that anymore, because I feel like, in fact, I get upset when we do give up a pass, and it's not even a big pass, but it's just like, you guys are better than this. You guys shouldn't let this happen. So, Eric Allen. The thing about Eric Allen too is, what's really frustrating is he was in the Pro Bowl with the Eagles, comes to the Saints, gets to the Pro Bowl his first year based on reputation. Doesn't, John Elmore was coaching him then. The son was coaching the secondary, and he really wasn't the Eric Allen we got used to seeing. He goes to the Raiders, becomes the Eric Allen we saw over there in Philadelphia because of the Pro Bowl again. So it's just, no, we don't talk about Eli Apple. I was watching the 2019 highlights, and Eli Apple was just getting his ass toasted. And then all of a sudden, they pick up Jackrabbit, Janoris Jenkins, off the waiver wire, and Eli Apple's gone. They get rid of his ass, put Janoris Jenkins in there, and suddenly the secondary was a lot better. And the Saints, they were on their way to the playoffs that year. It's just, Eli Apple was like the throwback player. He reminded me of what we used to see in the secondary all the time. Yeah, when John was talking about wanting us to do our Mount Rushmore, I'm going to come on the show and I think I'm going to say, yeah, I mean, I know we're all got the same linebackers, right? I got Joe Fettisfield, I got Doc Kovac, I got, that's what we're going with, right? Mark Fields, yeah. Oh, we got to talk about those other guys. Yeah, that's going to be a lot more difficult. That because there's 6, obviously, and where those 6 fall, 2 of the Dome Patrol members have to come out. If you want to include the other 2, so it's really going to be tough to do that. If you were to do a Mount Rushmore, though, of wide receivers, Saints wide receivers, who would be your Mount Rushmore Saints wide receivers?
The top 3 are very.
We're stealing all of John's stuff, but we're not part of that conversation, so we can talk about this.
You're right. The top 3 are very easy for me, and they come for me in this order: Marcus Colston, number 1; Michael Thomas, number 2; a close number 2; Joe Horn, number 3. 4 is tough. 4 is tough for me, and I'm gonna go a little bit. I'm gonna go Lance Moore over Abramowitz. I am. I'm going to go Lance Moore over Abramowitz, who I don't remember watching regularly. I love Wes Chandler. I love Wes Chandler, but Wes Chandler was only with the Saints a couple of years.
Yeah.
I will go Lance Moore over Eric Martin. I was never an Eric Martin guy. I think Lance Moore, slightly different eras, I grant you, but I think Lance Moore could do more on the field and for an offense than what Eric Martin could. Eric Martin was basically, until Quinn Early got there, no disrespect to Lonzel Hill. I'm friends with Lonzel Hill. I've interviewed him a couple times. Great guy. Unrealized potential there, though. Eric Martin was literally the only target that Bobby Hebert had to throw to. Meanwhile, Lance Moore distinguished himself very well. I thought he was a spectacular route runner. I love Quinn Early. I don't think Quinn played enough years to crack my list, and that's why I'll go Lance Moore, as my 4th. And I went Colston slightly over Thomas. I think Thomas was the better receiver. Colston did it more consistently longer, and that's why he's number 1 for me.
I get poor John. I've gotten into arguments with John Sigler on Twitter /X about Chris Olave because he's a huge Olave fan,
and I am too.
And my thing about Olave is he's got a little bit of that diva in him. He's got a little bit of that. I don't like to get my jersey dirty.
Yeah.
And it's funny, here I'm wearing Graham's Pro Bowl jersey, and Graham was accused of being that kind of player. But I just feel like he lacks the physical toughness that a Michael Thomas, a Marcus Colston, and an Eric Martin showed. And that always elevated a receiver to me more than the guy who runs great routes, is fast, but doesn't like to get hit. Looks for the out of bounds all the time. Just wants to be the guy who makes the flashy plays. And Olave can change. Olave can grow. I'm not really being critical of Olave. Just my perception of him as of his career right now. Joe Horn was another guy who took a hit and was proud of it. Got up from taking those hits. Was willing to go and try and fight for the ball in traffic, knowing he's going to get killed. Knowing that Aaron Brooks threw that ball high, exposing his ribs, and he's going to take a shot. And he still went and got it and still came down with the ball. That meant a lot to me. That's what I really enjoyed about guys. So, I understand your thing about Lance Moore, because Lance Moore grew on me. I think the 2008 season really solidified him with me, whereas before 2006, 2007, I was kind of like, he's a pet, that kind of thing. it's like Keyshawn Johnson, but yeah, I just didn't think much of him. He's too small. He's not fast. He's not really. I don't think he's really tough. I don't know. I think he's just a guy out there. And then in 2008, he proved me wrong. And of course, 2009, just spectacular, making those. It wasn't a big year, but making those critical catches.
Yep.
But I'm giving my Mount Rushmore is those same three guys, and I'm throwing Eric Martin in there only because Eric Martin was that guy who took a lot of abuse. He took a lot of shots.
He did.
And still came down the ball. Rarely did he drop a pass. And it was unfortunate that the way Bobby only targeted him. In fact, you ask Mo Hill about that. Mo Hill will say that. You ask Bobby.
Yes.
You ask Bobby about that. Bobby will say that Mo Hill didn't run good routes and he didn't trust him. You ask Brett Perryman about that. Brett Perryman says, I'm with Mo Hill. So, and I brought that up back when last year when Derek Carr, I knew he was going to do it one time. Derek Carr was yelling at Olave for running bad routes, and Derek Carr was getting on his receivers, and there was fighting going on during that time. Bobby Hebert used to do that a lot. And people don't really remember that because they just remember seeing Dome Patrol and all that stuff. But the reality was Hebert and Mo Hill, and especially Perryman took it to the media. Not getting the respect, not getting the looks, the targets that he felt like he deserved. And, he felt like he needed to be out there a lot more, and he was not getting put out there. He was upset about that. So, it was a flashback for me, but for a lot of people who just remember Breeze and started watching the Saints during the Horn Brooks era, they're not used to seeing that.
No.
So
no.
But I did see it a lot. And yeah, I agree with you too about Wes Chandler. Wes Chandler was my guy. I've said this many, many times. When Wes Chandler became a Saint in 78, and the first time he went up and got a ball, a la Lynn Swan, I'm like, we finally got one. We finally got one. But Bum Phillips came along. That wasn't Bum's kind of receiver. And he goes to San Diego and does the incredible things near Coryell's offense. But it's interesting, Abramowitz was the first Saints Pro Bowler. Back in '69, he led the league in receptions in an era, with Billy Kilmer and Ed Hargett throwing to him. He still led the league in receiving. I could go through a lot of them. I was listening to the one, and John, I'm telling everybody, we talk about a lot with the Bayou Blitz. Check out Life of a Saint. Check out John Butler's page when he talks about his Mount Rushmore players. He did his offensive line this past week. I'm so bad. I don't remember who it was he had on his show.
I haven't been able to check it out yet. I got the alert for it because I subscribed to John's channel too. I just haven't checked it out yet. I will, John. If I'm going to be on the unemployment line soon, and I might be, I'll have plenty of time to do it.
Well, it's funny because I'm listening to it, and of course the obvious one was Willie Roaf, and then they threw Jari Evans in there, who will be in the Hall of Fame. And then after that, they really kind of fell off from there as far as them being in agreement. Carl Nix came up. I'm trying to remember who John had his as his third. I know he had Jake Cupp as his fourth, which was a nice throwback. He mentioned John Hill.
Turley should better be at least in that conversation.
I don't think either one of them had Turley in there because the other one had Nix and Stan Brock. That was the other one he had on
That's
there.
a good one.
Stan Brock. He had
That's a
Stan
good one. You can make a case for Ramczyk.
Ramczyk, yeah. Okay.
No, Dolph doesn't subscribe to Saints Pass like we three do, John.
Yeah.
I love Dolph. He's spectacular. I love being on his show. Dolph, if you're watching, reach out to me again. It's another one I can't get schedules coordinated with. But you can't get the young guys on your show to talk about Saints past.
Yeah. Well, John. John was bringing up Jim Dombrowski. Jay Cup, as I said, was his fourth one. I was waiting to hear somebody say LaCharles Bentley. He was only there for a couple of years. He played at guard 1 year, then moved to center, and then he went to Cleveland and said, "Don't ever put me on that team ever again." Talking about the Saints, and then he got Mercer for that. So that'll teach you a lesson. But yeah, it was interesting to hear all the names that they were bringing up because I was thinking about mine, and mine is really hard because after you get Rofe, and Rofe and Evans, then you start getting into now do you value longevity or do you value impact on the team? Carl Nix was more impactful than a Jim Dombrowski, but Jim Dombrowski was there for a much longer period than Nix. Brock, of course, played 13 years for the Saints. Unfortunately, his last appearance as a Saint was the most unceremonious because he literally got lifted off the ground, which Reggie White did this a lot to a lot of people. We got lifted off the ground and got thrown into Bobby Hebert for a safety. Oh, Max Unger.
Unger's a good one.
Yeah. And that again, that's the age because Hilgenberg probably has Joel Hilgenberg probably has a better argument because he at least was a Pro Bowler as a Saint and he played center a lot longer. I like his brother Jay better, but that was another thing. That's a whole another conversation.
Here's a Mount Rushmore that I don't think interferes with what you're doing, John, but might be a good topic. Your Mount Rushmore of Saints free agent acquisitions.
Ooh.
Breeze is obviously number one.
Mm-hmm.
I think number two should be fairly obvious too.
Who's your number two?
Well, actually, number 2 and 3 for me are obvious. We mentioned one guy's name already, but Demario Davis is number 2 for me. Joe Horn is number 3.
I almost have those guys flipped. With Horn ahead of Davis.
And I could be persuaded either. It's just about a coin flip for me.
Yeah, because the thing about Horn, nobody knew who he was.
Right.
I'll never forget hearing the day they signed him. I'm in Lafayette driving home from work, and I'm listening to, this is Lafayette now. I'm listening to the 870. Buddy D has got Mike Detillier on, and Mike Detillier says, "Well, he was a fourth receiver in Kansas City. He might be a good kick returner. We don't know probably get much out of him, but he's a nice find. We'll see if we can do something with him." And he turned out to be the franchise leader until Colston came along. So, whereas Demario Davis, he wasn't a Pro Bowler, I think, as a Jet, but I saw him as a linebacker for the Jets when the Saints played the Jets. I think it was, what year was that? Was that 2016, 2017?
It was. I think it was I think it was the 17 season. Yeah.
It's the one where Mark Ingram has a big run and he swims in the end zone, in the dome. And I said, I don't know who the shit that linebacker is, but he is making every friggin' tackle.
Yep.
You know, when he is just running like a lunatic out there. And then I'm looking in the program, like, who the hell is this guy? And sure enough, I remembered his name. And then when we signed it, I said, oh yeah, we got one. So my expectations for DeMario were a lot higher than Joe Horn's. In fact, that whole free agency class, I didn't get excited about a single guy they signed in that 2000 year until they signed Norman Hand. Because he was franchise. And the Chargers pulled the franchise label. I'm like, well, dude, if he's a franchise guy, and I know you put a fat guy next to Leroy Glover, we got something. And that's a good one for the Mount Rushmore. I'm putting Leroy Glover in there as probably number 4 because we got him for $100 from the Raiders. The Raiders had him in NFL Europe. Then they waived him, and we picked him up off of waivers. The best $100 we ever spent getting Leroy Glover.
That was I can't believe I didn't think of that one. Because my first thought went to Vilma, and then I'm like, no, they traded for Vilma. And then I'm coming up with good ones. Like Malcolm Brown had a few good years at defensive tackle. Same with Nick Fairley. I'm like, come on, I could come up with better than that. I don't know how Leroy Glover just slipped right by me.
Well, and he was one of those guys that he just was there during the Ditka years.
Yeah.
Sammy Knight was a free agent now, an undrafted free agent, but he was a free agent. They brought in, just like Lance Moore, but they came during the Ditka years, so you really didn't think about him until the 2000 season.
Right.
But you could see Leroy Glover's talent in '99, Ditka's last year. You could see him just like Sammy Knight. You could see that coming. So yeah, it's you kind of get stuck with all the more recent guys. What we got here? Well, it's kind of a spur of the moment thing. This is what happens during the off season. You start thinking about these things now. But yeah, you start thinking about all the recent guys because we've had so much success that you almost have to push that aside and think about who are the guys that stood out during the lean years.
Right.
And that's when you start picking out guys at random. Like Darian Connor, a linebacker the Saints had who put one good season together for the Saints. And then he went on his way. He wasn't, they didn't keep him. And then he disappeared from the league after that. But, there was that one season, Darian Connor, this guy came from Atlanta. He's a pretty good linebacker. He can rush the passer, But outside of that, you really start going, man, we had Conrad Dobler for a while. That was kind of cool, and that was a trade. But yeah, you start really having a strain thinking about some of these guys prior to the success. But that would be a good one. That'd be an interesting one to see what fans would do. Like I said, I think it would all be 2009 onward, and a lot of people would put like Vilma in there. Forgetting he was a trade. Shockey, he was a trade.
Yeah.
They're not going to put a guy like Keith Mitchell, who was an undrafted guy. Leroy Glover, we talked about. Norman Hand, that was a free agent pickup. Receiver wise, what do you think of? He came from Indianapolis. He wore number 80. What was his name again? He was part of the River City Relay. He's I can hear Jerome Pathan.
Yes.
I had to think about Jim Henderson's radio call going through the River City Relay, and he talks about the Pathan got the ball. I can hear that. So,
listen, I like Pathan. But when we just glossed over our Saints Hall of Fame wide receivers, it's other than 6 or 7. I mean, we named our 4, our 5, because I had Lance Moore, you had Eric Martin, and Eric Martin would probably be 5th for me. After that, you are talking about, I think, Quinn Early. I'm obviously,
Yeah,
we've met the guy, we know him, but he was a pretty damn good receiver too.
yeah, he was.
Um, and outside of that, and if you want to throw Wes Chandler in there for his couple of years, okay, and obviously Abramowitz has to be in the conversation. Outside of that, you have a hard time rounding out the top, the rest of the top 10 or 12. Maybe it's Pathan, Willie Snead, Brandon Cooks. I mean, we talked about Brandon Cooks at the beginning of the show, when it came to wide receiver money, but we didn't talk about how well Brandon Cooks played as a Saint. Olave, is he already in the top 10 or 12? After two very good seasons, I don't think so. Not if you account for longevity, but I do think that Brandon Cooks, Chris Olave have already surpassed guys like Dante Stallworth, Jerome Pathan, Brett Perryman, guys that I liked, that I was fans of, Lonzel Hill. But that just, when you look at the numbers, even for when they played at the time, they weren't overly impressive.
Yeah. Well, we talk about another free agent that I just thought of as you were going through those names. Wesley Walls. I was pissed off when we let Wesley Walls go to Carolina, because I thought, much like, not to this level, of course, but much like the decision to go with two first, Marcus Davenport over Trey Hendrickson, I felt like they went with the draft guy and Irv Smith rather than keep Wesley Walls. And Devery Henderson was a second-round pick, and the funny thing about Devery Henderson, I'll finish my thought on Wesley Walls in a second, but the funny thing about Devery Henderson couldn't catch a cold naked in the Arctic until he got with Coach Johnson's Curtis Johnson. Curtis Johnson taught him how to catch. And I know at LSU he caught the Bluegrass Miracle, and I know he was a productive player. But Michael Clayton was a better receiver at LSU and the better pro until Johnson got to the Saints, and he made Devery Henderson a much better receiver. But my thought on Wesley Walls, just to finish this, I was upset that we let Wesley Walls go because I felt like Wesley Walls was the more developed tight end than Irv Smith was. He wasn't a very good blocker, but he was a hell of a pass catcher. And I think between he and Quinn Early, that's when Jim Everett got mad in '96, saying, "You let all my guys go. These are the guys I want to throw to. These are the guys I trust, and you're letting them go from money because you think you've got more talent at cheap contracts, and you think it's Jim Finks is still running this organization, but you're going to give money to Torrance Small, who was a good number 3 guy, and I know Torrance. My daughter played basketball with his kid, and Torrance Small was a number 3 guy. He was not a number 2, much less a number 1 guy. And I thought Irv Smith was an okay blocker and an okay pass catcher, but wasn't really elite at either of them, whereas Wesley Walls was a much better pass catcher. So, it's tough. It's tough. We didn't even talk about this. To no one's surprise whatsoever, Brees has been elected to the Saints Hall of Fame, and he's going in by himself, the only player. I mean, we could do 3 consecutive shows and not talk about the same play twice about Drew Brees and all that he has done. And Drew Brees is eligible for the NFL Hall of Fame, I think, in 2026. I think it's 5 years, so 2025 will be 5 years. So I think he'll be there in 2026 in Canton. But if somebody just came from outer space or out of a coma for the past 20 years, and you want to describe Drew Brees with a single game or a single performance, what game would you pick?
Oh my God. The Giants game in 2015.
Yeah.
And that was a very forgettable team. Because that was the second of Sean Payton's 3 straight 7 and 9s. A disgraceful defense.
Oh yeah.
And Drew Brees and that offense literally carried that team. They needed every single one of the 50-something points. What was it? 52-49, 51-48, something like that.
52-49.
They needed every single one of those. And I mean, that might be an easy game to point to for the stat heads because of the 7 touchdowns that he threw. But again, you look at that Giants defense, and that was a pretty darn good defense on paper. That was a playoff caliber defense, and Brees just shredded them. Without the benefit of much of a running game, I think they ran for more yards than what the Giants did that day. But it was just an aerial shootout. As far as singular plays, the Jimmy Graham touchdown pass and the San Francisco playoff loss, comes to mind. But I mean, you're talking about for my money, and I'm a John Elway guy, but Drew Brees was hands down the most accurate passer in NFL history. I don't want to hear it from the idiots that say, "Oh, he was a dink and dunk passer," with Michael Thomas slant boy. No, we're talking. When I say the best pinpoint passer, I'm talking intermediate zones where the linebackers drop into coverage, where the safeties come up and try to make ESPN highlight plays. Where the cornerbacks make their money. That's where Drew Brees was the toughest. So there's any number of accurate passes that I could point to. But I mean, the Super Bowl when he got on that roll of however many straight completions. The other all the 400 and 300 yard games that he had in his career. It's easy to see that Giants game in 2015 go by the wayside because the team didn't go anywhere. But that was also a testament to how good Drew Brees was, no matter how bad the team was around him.
Absolutely. I mean, 2016, Michael Thomas had 1,000 yards receiving. Brandon Cooks had 1,000 yards receiving. Willie Snead just missed the 1,000-yard mark by like 25 yards or 30 yards, something ridiculous like that. And Mark Ingram rushed for 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
And he took a Super Bowl team in the Atlanta Falcons down to the wire and was going to beat the Falcons, very close to beating the Falcons in a meaningless game really for Atlanta. But it still was a rivalry game, and he took them down to the wire, and he really showed them something. I mean, it's tough. I was going to pick the Giants game, too, from 2015. The Atlanta game, I think it's week 3 or week 4 in 2017 when he does, or maybe 2018 when he does the spin move. I think it was 2018. He does the spin move. That was just an incredible performance. I rewatched the 2006 highlights of that season, and man, you can see it building. Brees in the beginning is struggling to complete, to throw passes. He's not as accurate as we're used to seeing. It's a little rough looking, and then around the Tampa and Pittsburgh games, and it clicks, and you start seeing it. So when you get to that Dallas game in 2006, that's the Drew Brees that we were going to see for the next 16 years. It just his ability to dissect an offense, a defense, but dissect an offense too, but dissect the defense. Even if you got him confused. My son was watching the 2011 Saints Texans game last night, and the first half, the offense is really struggling to get something going. But man, that second half, it's like he figured out what Wade was doing to him, and you weren't stopping him now. It's on, and he's hitting people, like this, like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a Giants game that year, 2011, they had a minute 12 left, 8 plays, 34 seconds, touchdown. I mean, it's just like, what the hell? And it's just, that's the kind of stuff that he did. And I just, it just blew me away. Oh, I know. Don't get me started on that. It burns me up because it gets me mad about the 2018 NFC Championship game all over again.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, Saints win that game like they should have. They're beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl because that Patriots team was a good defensive team, but not a good offensive team.
Mm-hmm.
And Breeze is beating them. So if you have a quarterback who beat both Manning and Breeze in a championship game, there is no way you cannot have him on a list of top 3 quarterbacks, if not top 2, because he beat them both. It's just, yeah, don't get me started because that game, the more I think about it, the more legacies I see that got screwed up because of an official's blatant error. And I'm going to call it an error, but I think it was fixed.
Yeah, you call it error. I call it blatant corruption, and will to the day I die.
Yeah. My wife says she can put on my tombstone. No, I'm still not over it. That game, I think NFL Network put on that game for sadists or masochists to try and quote unquote enjoy. I said I'll never watch that game again. I've watched Big Ben again. I've watched the Minneapolis Miracle again. I always turn it off at the 10-second mark.
Same.
I turn it off there. I've watched the 2011 49ers playoff game again. I turn it off after Jimmy Graham scores his touchdown. But, I've watched Saints losses again. I will never watch that game because it just pisses me off because it's not a game where we made mistakes that cost us the game. It was a game that it was taken from us. So that's just how I feel. All right. All that said, I'm so happy Breeze is in the Saints Hall of Fame. That's going to be an incredible night. It's going to be the Denver game that they're going to induct him. Personally, I think he ought to come out just like John Riggins did. Come out of the tunnel in full uniform with the black eye makeup on. Come running through there with the smoke and everything else. Just for the fans, because he deserves that.
He does.
What happened in 2020, and that son of a bitch with the COVID restrictions and made him play a half empty or a 3/4 empty dome, and he found out he's making all that crap up on the fly. All right, never mind. I'm gonna let that go. I just feel like Breeze deserved an entire stadium full of 70,000 people saluting him for 16 years of just unprecedented quarterback play. So I want him in that Denver game come out in full uniform for the whole crowd. I want the Saints to retire his jersey number and put his name up in the lights all in the same game. Make that game, poor Sean Payton, but make that game like the Atlanta game when they returned to the Dome from Katrina, because that's what that man deserves. Because I know there'll be other quarterbacks, but I don't believe I will ever see a Saints quarterback do what I saw that man do for 16 years in my lifetime, the rest of my lifetime. Maybe some of the kids will get to see somebody, but I know I won't.
No, I definitely won't either. Yeah, and there'll be guys, especially in this day and age, that might put up even comparable numbers. But Drew Brees was one of those rare players that, yes, put up the numbers. I mean, video game type of numbers. We just got done discussing it, but he transcended even that. He was that special. Um, he was a guy that only needed to throw 10 passes to beat you because all 10 were going to be daggers through the heart of the defense. Because, like you said, he was just nobody in NFL. Maybe Johnny Unitas, could dissect an NFL defense. Not only in a singular game, but from a play to play basis, like Drew Brees could ever. And frankly, in my head, it's not even close.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's why I screamed, how does it feel when Jimmy Graham scored that touchdown against the 49ers? Because I've seen Montana do it to us, and I wanted to return the favor in the worst way.
Yeah, I actually take back what I just said about maybe Unitas could die. Yeah. Joe Montana could dissect like Drew Brees too, but that's it.
Yeah. What's going on in Bayou Bliss tomorrow night?
We don't know.
Hey,
I mean, yeah,
more in this show. So.
More Saints talk for sure. John, and I know you tune into both shows, John. I promise you, even if Brendan tries to go down that road, I won't steal any more Mount Rushmores from you. Brendan has a great football mind. He respects football history, but he can't talk it like you and I can. So I can't see it. I can't see it going that direction. Boo Williams. I don't know what happened to you last week. We're still going to try to get him on, and through the off season and on here too. We'll try to get some of these past players on. I think just whatever comes to our mind tomorrow night. We're going to be talking football. We're going to be talking Saints, and we're going to be having fun. I promise you that much.
Absolutely, yeah. The mini camp is next week. I think it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, something like that. It's not the weekend, but anyway, mini camp and then a break for 6 weeks. And then they go to California. First training camp out in California since, I want to say, since the 60s. I don't think they've been out there since then.
Didn't they have a year or two under Mora where they were out there, or was that in Texas?
They were in Minnesota, in La Crosse. I'm sorry, Wisconsin. They were in Wisconsin. I think they were in Hammond his first year, and they were in Ruston 1 year, which is even hotter. And then they went up to La Crosse and did La Crosse for the rest of Mora's tenure and Ditka's years. They didn't come back home until Hazlitt in 2000. And then through the 70s with Meekum, they were at Vero Beach, Florida, where the Dodgers do spring training, because there was a marina there, and that's where Meekum used to keep his yacht. So they were at Vero Beach, I think from 70. I think they were there from 72 to 74. Went 1 year in Thibodeau and got eaten alive by mosquitoes. Then went back to Vero Beach, and they were there all the way until Meekum sold the team. So, yeah. Interesting training camp sites, but I think the 60s was the last time they were out in California. They were in California 2 years in the 60s. So, anyway, be interesting to see what the weather's like. They get a more productive training camp if it's a lot like how the weather was up there at the Greenbrier without the Greenbrier curse. So, yeah. We'll talk more about training camp and training camp history, and I got some funny stories and some bad ones, but I got some funny stories about training camp. So that'll be the kind of stuff we'll fill up the time with. Bob, thanks for sticking with us. Thank all y'all for sticking with us. Hopefully, It seemed like the stream went better, except for the monster growling and howling. I think that the stream went better, so I'm gonna check it out later on tonight. But thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you next time under the dome. Good night, everybody.
Good night.